intend to do with this presentation is to tell a story of how we moved to the initial conceptualization of SARChI chairs to where we are today in terms of celebrating the newly installed chairs, 41 of them who are from HDIs, UOTs, and emerging universities. And just to quickly tell you background of it, if you look at the NRF mandate, it's anchored on 4 legs. The first leg is the leg that actually propels this initiative, and it's that leg that says, how do you actually create HCD for the sector and for the country? And the second part is the one that says, that how do we ensure that there's national research facilities that allows for the support of this research ecosystem. And the third one says it's not enough to have the HCD, it's not enough to have research platforms. It's absolutely crucial that there's some level of public awareness and public engagement with science. Hence, the engagement with science through SASTA, which is focused on science engagement and engaged research. And finally, the last part is the part that says it's not enough to do all that without contributing to the building of the national system of innovation. And for that, as we quickly move through this, the NRF then says, guided by DSTI, we then say that there has to be a lens through which we judge what we do: transformation, innovation, excellence, and sustainability. And the question says, to what point for impact? So you will note that quite a bit of the initiatives that comes out of the NRF are now focused on social impact. And the question then becomes, how do we ensure that research benefits our society? Just very quickly to say, how do we get to this point? What is that policy framework that actually got us to where we are? Right? And if you look, and just a brief historical evolution of our policy landscape, you will note that what we then cluster as phase 1, which is post-1994, was when the key focus was on institution building and coordination. This is the time where the 1996 white paper on science and technology came in. This is the time where the establishment of NACI came in, and this is the time when the establishment of the NRF came in. And the policy imperative at the time was to say, how do we create a coherent democratic research and innovation system? So you will note that the implication at this point is to say, how do we build capacity? So at this point, what is important is how do we ensure that we build research capacity that begins to have an element of redress. Phase 2 is the phase that can be categorized from 2000 to 2007. And here the policy logic was to say that research and innovation should be purposeful, inclusive, and aligned to national imperatives. So this is the time where we are seeing priorities then being on equity and strategic sectors. And this is where the national research and development strategy starts to conceptualize the concept of the SARChI chairs. So we see also this is the time where we have the indigenous knowledge systems that also begins to feed into the conceptualization of the chairs and the centers of excellence later. Phase 3 is the time that can be categorized from 2008 and 2012. Here, the policy logic is that public research must translate into economic and social value. So whereas initially you were looking at, can we then look at the issue of redress? Can we make sure that we increase the number of researchers and transform the landscape? This is now saying that that is not enough. What is now important is that public research must translate into economic and social value. The phase that then followed that is the phase of 2012 to 2019, where then the policy lever here, or the policy logic, is that STI is a lever for poverty reduction, inequality, and state capability. And the focus here is where we see the National Development Plan guiding us towards 2030. The National Development Plan then saying, for example, by 2030, we should be producing around 5,000 PhD per year. Currently, we are, I think, around 3,400. The question is, how do we then ensure that we deliver on the NDP imperatives? Again, the implication here is that research impact becomes central to the legitimacy of public funding. Phase 5 is the phase that comes from 2019 to present. This is where we are seeing 2019 white paper on STI, whose operationalization is in the Decadal Plan, which informed what we are celebrating here today. So the implications here is that it's not enough to count. What is important is that we must make sure that research elevates our country. Very quickly, if you then, with that in mind, say, how did we get here, I've already talked about the 1996 white paper and the national and R&D strategy in 2002. But in 2006, we see the establishment of SARChI as a DSTI initiative, DST at the time, and implemented by the NRF in 2008. And notice the intentionality of this initiative. 2008 is it's established by 2000 and 2006 is established by 2008. We already have 72 research chairs who are awarded, and already we have 374 postgraduate students supported. This is an initiative that we know works. 2009, there's a commitment of 150 million to make sure that there can be an expansion of the initiative. At that point, we have now 82 research chairs from 72. That was in 2008. We are now in 82. In 2015, again, the element of intentionality comes in. The interrogation of the chairs then says that there has to be that we are elevating the number of female researchers that are holding the SARChI chairs. There was a call, and in 2015, under Minister Pando, we see 42 female chairs being announced, and at this point, we have a total of 197 chairs that are being reported. 2019, this is where we see the STI on the white paper on science, technology, and innovation, and the Decadal Plan affirming the 15-year investment logic of SARChI. 2023, we are now seeing NRF reporting 197, and now as we stand, we are around 321 chairs that have been awarded. In 2026, which is now, we are now saying we have 41 Decadal Plan aligned chairs launched for HDIs, UOT, and emerging universities. Very briefly about SARChI. Why SARChI? Why are we doing this as a country? We do this because we believe, or the thinking at the time was that research must be strengthened, research capacity. So initially, there was an HCD part of it, which still exists. But that's not just that. It's also, how do we ensure that we address the challenges of the country, but not only that, how do we address the lack of transformation? Hence, you have seen through that journey, the intervention, including the intervention that we are celebrating today. 3 types of chairs. We have your SARChI chairs who are focused on basic research. You have ones that are focused on industry and innovation, or in partnership with industry and innovation. For example, we have the ones with Standard Bank, for example. And we have bilateral and international research chairs, and these are largely focused on international type of priorities. And so, in essence, as we sit today, the number of SARChI chairs that have been awarded is 362. Can be that we are then doing this without necessarily paying attention to the SDGs. So initial initiatives made sure that there's an alignment with the SDGs, and what this diagram does is to show you the alignment that the chairs has with the SDGs. So it's not enough to say, I am focused just on my research. It is to what extent is the research enabling the country to address the challenges, and to what extent is it contributing to the development goals. And if you're saying, are they delivering? We say, yes, they do. Note that just the research articles from 2012 to 2023, you had around 14,952 outputs that were produced. And also note that there are books, there are patents, there are prototypes, there's policy briefings that comes out of it. And you look at it and say, this is an instrument that definitely works. What are some of the examples that we see? For example, there's a chair that was very much appraised by Water Research Council, and this chair is focused on water, food systems, learning, vocation, education, and multi-institutional partnerships at Rhodes University. And very briefly, reading some of what they say, it says the work was of this Amanzi for food, was inspired or worked or was very much led by a SARChI chair who then also worked with the University of Mpumalanga. Not only that, that's largely that you see applications being on issues around water. There's also SARChI chairs that produce artifacts that look at, for example, pharmaceutical innovation with IP that then gets to say, how do we make sure that there's translation of research into artifacts that begins to produce alternative medicine that can be affordable. There's also in social sciences, if you're thinking this is just focused on the sciences, if you look at University of Fort Hare, they have a very strong collaboration with Spelman, and the chair is looking at the translational Black feminist scholarship and global South diaspora networks. And so, with that in mind, question then becomes, if we look around, do we see disparities? And indeed, what this graph shows, it shows you before the intervention what the distribution of the chairs were. Note that there are some institutions where we didn't even have chairs. And what this intervention said, it said, what we intend to do is that for institutions who has less than 14 chairs, they're eligible for raising their hands. And these are largely HDIs, UOTs, new universities and emerging new universities, and universities that have researchers, SARChI chairs that are less than 14. Right. And the number of applications we received around 147 applications, and the outcome, we ended up with 41 chairs. Now you can see that the number that then came from universities of technology, how much we ended up with, how much we ended up with HDIs, and you can now see, for example, that some institutions which had 0 now have a chair. This are Decadal Plan aligned SARChI chairs. Note that if you look at it, you start to look at where exactly are we seeing alignment with the Decadal Plan. What this then shows is the number of chairs that are then looking at circular economy, education for future, sustainable energy, future of society, health innovation, high-tech industrialization, nutrition security, water security. And some research might try traverse more than one thematic area.